from the Portuguese to Sweden. 1654, Sweden built a fort on this land. They called it Fort Carolsberg. But in 1658, Denmark attacked Sweden and took the fort from them. It got to some point. Holland also fought Denmark. And finally in 1664, England also attacked the Dutch. You realize that in 1664, something coincided. 1664, the British and the Dutch were fighting among themselves along the coast of West Africa for trading posts. Again, they were fighting in North America for colonies. So in 1664, another colony in North America changed hands from the Dutch to the English. They called it New Amsterdam. But when the British took over in 1664, they renamed it. They called it New York. Yep. It was the same year that this place also changed hands from Holland to England. So when the English took over, they came out with a castle, now Cape Coast Castle. And also, when we talk about West Africa and Central Africa, along our coast, we had more than 40 European fort and castles. And out of that number, Ghana had more than 30 of them. So Ghana had all the fort and castles West Africa had. First of all, we had all the fort and castles because of gold. Gold only attracted the Europeans to West Africa. And when they came to West Africa, they had so much gold in Ghana than any other West African country. That is how come the Europeans named Ghana the Gold Coast. But when we had independence, the name Gold Coast was changed to Ghana. Ghana also means the land of gold. So I can say this for a fact. The name Ghana was adapted by our president, our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So meaning the name Ghana existed so many years ago. So have you ever heard of the old Ghana Empire? Timbuktu was it the capital also? Yes. They had a king they called Mansa Musa. So I'm talking about present day Mali, some part of Mauritania, some part of northern Cote d'Ivoire. So that was the old Ghana Empire, and their emperor was called Mansa Musa. So that was around the 13th century. You see, Mansa Musa established the Timbuktu University, where he employed Arabs. Again, Mansa Musa was converted into Islam. So what actually happened was every faithful Muslim would have to travel to Mecca. It is accounted that whenever he travels to Mecca, the value of gold in the Middle East comes down. As a result of the gold he took along from West Africa to that region. Through the Arabs, this news spread all over Europe. And from that, the Europeans knew that we had so much gold at this part of the world. So that is why they came. And when they came, they had it. Today, Ghana is still the leading producer of gold in West Africa. In Africa, Ghana is second to South Africa. So that was the reason behind all the fort and castles we had along our coast. But to the out of that number, we have 3 well-preserved castles. Apart from Cape Coast Castle, we have Elmina Castle. Elmina Castle is the oldest. It is 200 years older than Cape Coast Castle, built in 1482. We have the other one in Accra, we call Christiansborg Castle, built by Denmark in 1661. And apart from the castles, we have forts. The forts are quite smaller compared to the castles. And also, let me tell you this, when you're using the coast of Ghana, let's say from the borders between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire to the west, and to the east between Ghana and Togo, when you're using the coast, within an interval of every 10 to let's say 100 kilometers, you find a fort or a castle. So Elmina Castle is just about 10 kilometers from here. About 20 kilometers, we have Fort Amsterdam. It continues on and on. But again, today, my emphasis will be on the transatlantic slave trade. The British only constructed Cape Coast Castle to transact their business in slaves, not in gold. Because around the 1700s, it was more lucrative, it was more profitable, exporting captives from West Africa to the New World rather than exporting gold to Europe. So the British built this castle with that intent. And what I can also say is this, we have the Royal Adventures of England, or Royal Adventures Company, which the British Crown had a percentage. So it's a combination of a company and the British Crown putting money together to establish something like this, to transact their business in gold and in slaves. And that company was given a monopoly. So they were the only English who could come and do the slave business. That was around 1762. But later on again, the whole thing was demonopolized, that all English merchants could come in and do the slave business. So here we are. This place used to be the slave market. They called it Palava Hall. And here the British merchant will wait for the Africans to bring the captives. So I'll take this opportunity and tell you how they got captives. See, let me start with this, slavery in general. I think slavery existed in every civilization over the years. Ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, and all that, they were slaves. And even before the Europeans came to West Africa, we practiced a form of slavery we called the indentured form of slavery, or the domestic form of slavery. But it was only when the Europeans introduced the Atlantic slave trade around the mid-1500s. But what I can say is this: you can never compare the kind of slavery we practice here to the one the Europeans introduced. There's a vast difference. With ours, you treated your captive as a member of the community. He had his right and privileges, his right to maintain his religion, his name and language. But when the Europeans came, they enticed Africans to supply them with captives, because probably Africans thought it was part of the system. So on the side of the Africans, this is how they got captives. First of all, they got captives through something we call intertribal wars, or ethnic warfare, where the Americans would say war captives or prisoners of war could be sold into slavery to the Europeans. People were kidnapped. Towns and villages were raided. Victims of religious crime were also sold off as captives. There were instances too, some of the Europeans went out there to raid, kidnap, they got slaves. Like for example, in Angola, one King Afonso complained that the Portuguese were depopulating his kingdom because they were raiding, kidnapping, getting people as captives from that very kingdom. So here, human beings were exchanged with guns, gunpowder, tobacco, alcoholic drinks, and the rest. So from here, all the captives were marched to the courtyard. That's down there. At the courtyard, the captives were branded. No branding. Like they had a piece of metal that bore the name of the company. Put it into fire. When the whole thing is red hot, they brought it out. Your hand, your chest, or your back was stamped. So the brand name on your skin identified the company. So after the branding, we had the male and the female dungeons. So we have a look at the dungeons very soon. Right. Any questions or comments before we move on with the tour? Okay. All right. So I think I'll give you a minute. You can have a look at what is here. There's an exhibition about South America, mostly Bolivia and I think Colombia. It talks about their civilization. So you can have a look at